Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
When unprecedented times are all the time, it's time to start walking the talk with PwC. Leaders like you turn to PwC to see and stay ahead. Upskill your workforce, use intelligent automation, and transform big ideas into breakthrough outcomes. Explore the human-led, tech-powered solutions that help you thrive. It's all part of PwC. Learn more at pwc.com.
See here. Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. Happy holidays. Hope you guys had a fantastic Thanksgiving week. Today, I've got a fantastic guest for you, Brian Smeltzer, coming out of SoCal, and he is the president at Liquid Mind. He empowers iconic brands. He's a brand executive and he's an author. He's also a host and keynote speaker. I'm really happy to have him on to share his expertise. Brian, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Nice to be with you today.
Yeah. Briefly introduce yourself, and I'm excited to dive into the discussion to add value to the audience.
Yeah, it's tough to make a quick introduction, so I appreciate you doing that for me. So, as you'd mentioned, Chris, I currently head up Liquid Mind, which is a global brand strategy firm, predominantly working with mid to large cap consumer brands. We work with brands like Nike, Adidas, Kawasaki, and different types of projects with them. And also at the same time, I'm also, you mentioned an author. Just recently released The Visionary Brand, which is a Amazon bestseller, and just finished my manuscript for my second book, which is The Visionary Leader. So I'm proud to see that finally come to fruition. And also a top 50 marketing podcast, The Visionary Chronicles. So that keeps me busy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's always great to have your path and purpose and mission. And so we'll talk about this. We'll talk about first thing is like visionary leadership and brand transformation. And what are your thoughts on defining what visionary leadership is and what role does it play in helping you transform brands for growth?
Yeah, I'll kind of take some context from the book and kind of why I wrote the book. It was interesting because I've been with a lot of what they would call, a lot of people would classify as very iconic brands, Adidas, Oakley, K-Swiss, TaylorMade, and these are very iconic brands. And I found when I was prior to writing the book, it was very interesting to me to see what people's context of what a visionary was. And I found my first visionary actually working with him directly was Jim Gennard out of Oakley. And Jim, being a visionary, was a big influence on me in the very beginning of my career. And so I always took these words, what I would call these words of wisdom from Jim to heart, and always felt, there's a lot of different visionaries I've either worked with, brands that I've worked with that people would classify as visionary, or people that I know of, like a Steve Jobs, that everybody says they're visionaries. Well, my curiosity was, well, what classifies, to your point, someone being a visionary leader? And what I found in writing this new book was there's a lot of different levels throughout history of different visionary leaders. And it goes all the way back to Socrates, it could be Aristotle, it could be Alexander the Great. And I found it very interesting because I was starting to do some of these podcasts with people with these visionary leaders, and they go, wow, I really never knew. I only heard about Alexander the Great. I didn't realize what a visionary leader he truly was. And so the context of visionary is very broad. And my first book, The Visionary Brand, I found it to be kind of this formula. What I find this progression between a visionary brand and a visionary leader is the brand itself is driven by a visionary leader. And what I found insightful with the visionary brand was I didn't really find there was a visionary brand. And I felt that's why I didn't name and title the book A Visionary Brand. It's The Visionary Brand. There really isn't one. There's a lot that are close, but I found this formula, there was always an element missing.
Mm, yeah. Interesting. And so, talk about, kind of your success formula for legendary brands and sharing key insights from the visionary brand, on what makes iconic brands stand out and maintain their status.
Yeah, there was these words and visionary brands, and what I looked at was I found that there were these what I call elements to the formula. And there's a lot of different areas that people would think, well, what's a visionary brand? It's a brand with great products. Well, it's a brand with great marketing. It's a great sales company. And so what I found is really all encompassing. It's all of these things, but the part of it being a visionary brand is it's something that flows through like the bloodline of a brand itself. And it is product, it is the passion, it is the visionary leader behind the brand. And all of these elements culminating, and people, one of the areas that I found in writing the visionary brand that people really didn't think about so much now with COVID, they think about it a lot more, is culture. People would always, when I would ask them, well, what is a visionary brand? And they would always tell me, well, I think it's somebody with great products like an Apple. It's somebody that has a great leader like Apple. And I said, well, would you want to work there? And they said, well, not necessarily. I think they're a great visionary brand. Well, then that's an element that's out of the formula of being a great visionary brand. And so, people don't always like to be driven that hard, but success is hard. And failure is a requirement to succeed, and nobody's ever succeeded without failing. And so the culmination of all of these elements I put in the book of the visionary brand, it would take me an hour just to talk about the different elements. But what I found interesting is there really wasn't any brand on the planet today that's really a truly visionary brand. It has all of these elements. What I found is there's some that are at the 90 percentile, some that are at the 10 percentile. What I found more interesting is I was asking people what they thought a visionary brand was. And the reality is what they were saying is just a singular element on a bigger formula that not anybody has.
Okay, I have to tell you, I was just looking on eBay where I go for all kinds of things I love, and there it was.
That hologram trading card. One of the rarest, the last one I needed for my set. Shiny like the
designer handbag of my dreams. One of a kind. eBay had it, and now everyone's asking, ooh, where'd you get your
windshield wipers? eBay has all the parts that fit my car. No more annoying. Just beautiful.
Whatever you love, find it on eBay. eBay. Things people love.
This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
That's really interesting. It's all because I've always been, kind of these brands that just kind of make their stamps on the public mind, Coca-Cola or, Amazon. So talking about, because you also scale startups, and from baby startups which have no mind share capture of attention versus large cap consumer brands, how are the branding strategies and mindset shifts different between these two endeavors?
Well, there's really four elements that people, when you kind of put the context of visionary brands, Chris, there was really four elements that I found they were saying, is it passion? Is it innovation? Is it culture? Is it marketing? And I said, well, it's all four of those. And the interesting thing from startups, and we do scale startups with LiquidMind, we whiteboard a lot of things that people are looking to do. And one of the things they always ask is, well, how do brands scale? And how do you get from ground zero to a viable, sustainable brand and company? And many people ask that question. And there's a reason there's a high failure rate with startups, because there's very few answers. So there's a statistic out there, 80% fail in the first 5 years, 80% of those that are left fail in the next 5 years. So it's a very dire percentage that are left after 10 years. But what I found the point of difference between those that are successful and those that aren't successful is, number one, a visionary at the head of the brand, one that's passionate, one that's authentic, one that doesn't give into the realities of the world, we call it, and sticks to what they feel their brand stands for, whether that be a brand that has a culture built around innovation, a culture built around disruption, and a culture built around openness and authentication. And culture is one that I mentioned culture again because it's usually one that's lost in the mix when you talk about startups and the success of those startups. What I tell these brands on the startup side and what we talk about in the Visionary Brand book is that product is a piece of that overall formula, and a great brand doesn't start with a great product. And a great example of that is there's many consumer brands like Mizuno is a great example of making a great footwear product, but not a great brand. So it's one of these that when you look at Apple, they have the magic formula of a visionary at the top when Steve was there. They had a visionary product that actually disrupted the market. So they were able to leapfrog over the competition and be able to, what I call, surf this wave of product innovation for generations. The problem is what's happening with Apple now is that they've surfed that wave too far and now it's evaporating. And so Steve gave them this huge swell of innovation that they surfed for 10 years, 15 years, and now the wave's no longer there. And now they're going to have to come back and play catch up. So when you look at the supply and demand curve, they have nothing on the front end of innovation. They have everything on the back end of late adopter phase, and they're trying to come up with new generations that will feed the front end, but you can't do that strategically. So these startups, I always say, start with your culture first. Start with someone at the top that has the passion and the vision of what you're looking to achieve as a company, as a brand, and then build a product around it and build that culture so you successfully can market it to the consumer that needs that particular product and you have a point of difference.
Mm. And what was interesting is, this kind of the Apple comeback story, and what processes or philosophies, we can use Apple as a company, do they follow to consistently innovate back then and disrupt traditional product categories? Because it was really interesting because Apple back then was seen as one company, and then Steve Jobs, they brought him back on, and then he went on to create like the iPhone and the Mac and all that. So what are your thoughts on just creating new product categories and disrupting these ways of thinking?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris, and it's one that we actually have a case study on in the book. And what happened when Steve came back? What did he do? And the example that we use is actually the iPod. And when you look at when Steve introduced the iPod, it wasn't the player. It was the disruption of the music industry behind it. So when Steve looked at it, he said, this is something that is absolutely going to disrupt the music industry. Well, those that didn't have the vision at the time said, well, it's a great product. Everybody was excited. But Steve said this is just a conduit to us disrupting another industry that's even larger. So coming out of the iPod was the iPhone. Coming out of the iPod was iTunes. And so if we look at the service-based business that Apple has right now, it had nothing to do with the product. It had everything to do with where it was expanding into and how they were going to disrupt it. Nobody ever thought he would succeed in disrupting the music industry, but he had a vision of an ecosystem. So successful companies, the most successful companies on the planet have an ecosystem. They're these octopuses. They have these tentacles that come out of the main body that everybody's attached to. And if you look at consumers today, the reason that Apple is so successful is Steve looked at as an ecosystem, this sphere of influence that they have with all of their products. And not just on the iPhone, but on music and all of the different services that they have now in the App Store. So that is a once in a lifetime person that's going to come in and disrupt the way Steve did and how he built Apple into the most valuable company on the planet.
Yeah. It's something that I've always, because there was this one thing is just creating is like Tony Robbins said, look where the market needs and adjust to that, and kind of this what you were talking about was the iPod, or that's just part of a bigger global thing. Talk about Microsoft, because Microsoft, they were PC desktop, and then they missed search, they missed social media, they missed the smartphone, and then they got back in cloud. So how did Satya come in and turn around the company?
Well, I'll go back, Chris, to what I mentioned is that one of the reasons companies are so successful and generational is a singular visionary. Steve Ballmer was not a visionary. He was a maintenance manager. And he had no vision of where to take Microsoft. And as a result of that, everybody underneath him was hand-tied. They couldn't do anything. They saw opportunity with Microsoft, but Steve Ballmer just wanted the status quo. And you'll see in the book where I say no company's been great when they just have management that's satisfied with the status quo. Yes, Microsoft controlled the desktop software, but like you said, they needed to expand beyond that because everything is progressing. There's a reason we don't use typewriters anymore. So it's the same thing with Ballmer. When Satya come in, he said, we need a services-based business and a subscription-based service. And he's actually one of my visionaries that I've put in the Visionary Leader book and have a case study with Satya, how he's been such a visionary at Microsoft since taking over from Steve Ballmer, because he also had to carry the torch. So he had from Bill Gates to Steve Ballmer, he had to carry the torch of Microsoft. They were successful, yes, but they were also a company that was losing touch with reality.
Yeah. Yeah. So, because kind of like HP and all these other companies, Intel as well. Talk about so with this new wave with the AI coming, what are your thoughts on how companies should be viewing AI and kind of giving this idea of just like disruption of the music industry back then, analogy to that, what kind of products or services will be revolved in this oncoming next wave of disruption?
Yeah, and this kind of goes towards Liquid Mind. We work with the brands, and the number one question they have on the whiteboard these days is how do we apply AI versus we have to apply AI. Their question to me is I have to. My question back is how are you going to apply AI to make you more efficient and more effective as a tool and a resource for those that are currently employed with your company and brand to make you better and more efficient and effective? And that's the big thing that I see right now with AI is that it's to be used as a tool and part of the brand itself and its overall growth as a brand and being more efficient at making your employees more effective. And it may sound simplistic, Chris, but too many people get tied up with what AI does and different things that it does. But it's a case right now, you have to figure out what tool do you need that's specific around where you have a weakness with your brand that you could be more effective. And then as a result, grow when you implement that. You can't say we need to do something, we have to do something. Those are the wrong questions. It is how do we do this? And how do we apply it to our brand where it makes sense, not only for the brand itself, it's authentic and something as a tool that our employees could use and feel comfortable with and allow us to gain market share and to be more effective as a brand and also a resource for those that need it.
Yeah. Zooming out, because kind of with entrepreneurship and innovation, it's really like startups is really easy, kind of you're just, it reminds me of this, scrappy startup, and then you've got this mature company. It has to go through and they have to view innovation differently. And then zooming out even bigger is like countries and governments. And, there was this point where people were saying other countries, China, India, Dubai, kind of all these other countries were eclipsing the United States. And if we didn't do something, we would basically have a decline of an empire. So how in terms of government or just bureaucracy, how do you get a grasp on innovation? Because, traditionally governments are very slow and resistant. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I again, when people talk about countries, having been to many, many countries around the world and talking with different brands, and I personally worked with several international brands heading up the product and marketing. And it's interesting, Chris, because I look at it as a culture issue. If it's been ingrained, they just do the same thing over and over again. It's a definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And I use just as an example, there's many of them, but I use Japan as an example. I've been over to Japan many times, and I said, I'm not worried about Japan's innovation. I said, what they're doing is killing their workforce. I said, when they're working 15, 16 hours a day, the human body is not meant to build efficient and effective beyond 8 to 10 hours a day. So I said, be more effective within that window of opportunity where your body is maximizing its thinking process and its thought process to allow you to be more effective in bringing innovation to the marketplace. When you're tired, you act tired, and as a result, the results aren't what you want them to be. So whether it be Japan, whether it be China, I've been to these countries, and also Europe's another interesting one as well, is they've got a different culture. The culture is ingrained that they take more vacations than we do. They take more time off than we do. I think the United States is a really beautiful blend of a great culture where we have the freedom to be successful. We have the resources that are willing to help us continue to innovate beyond where we're at today. And we're not suppressed by a government that's a dictatorship. So it's one of these where we have this ability through our culture to sustain innovation for generations where other countries don't do that. And I've just found that it'd be an interesting case study with Japan where I found that if you look at, and I'll use Sony as an example. And I put that as a case study in the book as well when you talk about Steve and how he successfully took over that market, is that it was the Sony Walkman that for generations was very successful, sold 100 million units, but it had no, beyond its first generation, had no innovation. They just let it bleed out. And since then, Sony really hasn't been at the leading edge of innovation since the Walkman. So it's just, they're kind of a follower in generational product, similar to how Skechers is with footwear. They're very successful, but what they do is they look at what others are doing and they just try to adapt and make something better. Well, that's not a way to lead and be innovative and be able to disrupt. It's not your nature or your culture.
Yeah, I really love that. How can people find out more about you and learn from you and connect with you?
Yeah, I've got a couple avenues where they can reach out, Chris. I actually have a free meeting if anybody wants to meet with me through Liquid Mind. You just go to liquidmindsite.com, liquidmindsite.com. You can reach out to me or anybody on our team and get a free meeting there. You can reach out to me at my first and last name, briansmeltzer.com. And I also have a master course that I just released, The Visionary Brand. It's over 2 hours of video chapter by chapter of the Visionary Brand, and that's at thevisionaryfiles.com, along with the podcast, The Visionary Chronicles. So a lot of different avenues you can reach out. You can also email me directly. I love when people reach out to me with questions at Brian, Bryan, at liquidmindsite.com.
Yeah, really enjoyed this. And again, thanks for sharing your expertise and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it.